Hi everyone. So today we are going to be breaking down the new parole in place. We have more information about when you can start applying, what documents you should be putting together to make that process as smooth as possible. So let's jump right in. The first thing I want to let you know is when the applications are going to start. So starting August 19th, USCIS is going to start accepting applications. That is the plan as of today, okay? As of today, the plan is that we're going to be able to apply for these starting August 19th, 2024. And the great thing about this is once that date reaches and you already have your documents together and all the information, you can go ahead and actually file the application. As of now, we don't have all the details yet on what form USCIS is going to want or anything like that because we are still waiting for them to publish it on the register. So that's the really big deal here is that we still don't know all the details yet, but we do know the date that we can start applying for it and the requirements and some of the documents you should start putting together. So that's what we're going to kind of break down today is what you can do today to put you in a great position to actually take advantage of this program once it opens up for applications, okay? Like I always tell you all, if anything changes, if there's any news, I will be bringing it to you to make sure that you are getting all the details as soon as possible. So let's jump right in. We're going to go over the requirements, right? What are the basic requirements? And then we're going to talk about the documents, the evidence that you should be putting together now to prepare you for when that eventually opens on August 19th. Sorry, my mouth just on August 19th. So you want to make sure you have all your documents and everything ready to go so that once it opens up, you can go ahead and file. If you are new here, hi, welcome. I am Lillian Chukura. I'm a US-based immigration lawyer, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the US immigration law system. And that is why I will keep telling you about this program, keep giving you information about this program, because this is going to make life easier for so many people that want to apply for a green card through marriage, but the problem is they entered without authorization, they entered without a visa. This program is going to make it so much easier for them to apply for a green card in the US. So let's start with the first requirement. The first requirement is that you are present in the US without admission or parole. This is really key. What this means is if you entered the US with a visa or you were paroled into the US, and when I say admission here, entering the US with a visa is key. If you entered with a visa, you no longer qualify for this because you're not asking for admission into the US, right? You already had a legal entry into the US. If you had a legal entry, this does not apply for you and you cannot apply for it. All right. This is for people that do not have legal entry into the US. The second requirement is that you have continuous physical presence in the US for 10 years as of June 17th, 2024. This is a key date, okay? This is a very important date for you to keep in mind as you're going through this process, is that June 17th, 2024. That's when this was announced and that was the cutoff date. So if your physical presence did not reach 10 years by that date, unfortunately, you will not qualify for this. But if you already had 10 years in the US before June 17th, 2024, you would qualify for this parole. So we'll talk about how you can show your physical presence coming up. But I just want to let you know that that is one of the requirements, is at least 10 years of continuous presence in the US. And then the next one is that you have a legal valid marriage to a US citizen as of June 17, 2024. This is really important. So if you got married after June 17, 2024, unfortunately, you missed the cutoff. If you were married before that, then you are still good. If you got divorced before June 17, 2024, you missed the cutoff. Okay. So when they say legally valid marriage, it means that you were still married to that person as of June 17, 2024. Okay. You cannot file for this if, let's say, you were married to a US citizen for 10 years and then you two got divorced in January 2024. You no longer qualify. I want to make that clear because I've had people reach out to see if they would qualify for this. But once you get a divorce, you are no longer legally married. And another thing to keep in mind here is if you have anything that makes your marriage not legal. So if you, let's say, for example, you got married after a divorce, but that divorce is deemed to not be valid, then that marriage is not legal. Okay, so it's really important to keep that in mind as well. Is when is that marriage legal? Is when two people are free to marry, legally free to marry, meaning there's no divorce that's still open. There's no prior marriage that wasn't ended legally. So you want to keep that in mind. You want to make sure that the marriage, any prior marriages ended, and that you have all the documentation for that. We will be talking about that in a few. And then you want to make sure that if you do have a criminal history, you are meeting with an immigration lawyer as soon as possible to see if that is going to be a disqualifying criminal history. The important thing to note here is we don't have the federal register yet that tells us exactly what they mean by disqualifying criminal history. So once we have that, I will do a follow-up video just on this particular point, but typically they're looking at serious offenses or multiple offenses as well. So felonies, multiple misdemeanors, those are what typically would be a disqualifying criminal history for these type of programs. So really important that you, if you do have a criminal history, that you are getting a consultation to make sure that it does not disqualify you. And if you want to do that consultation, you can schedule a strategy session with me by going to my website, lilylegal.com, and clicking on contact us, and you can pick a date and time for us to talk. And then the second part of this is that you do not constitute a threat to national security or public safety. So this is really important. They want to make sure that you are not a threat. How do they prove this? Right? They're going to do a background check on every single person. So you're going to have a biometrics appointment. You're going to have your fingerprints and picture taken, unless you already have that and they're willing to take the one they already have. But if there's anything in your background that could potentially make you a threat to national security or public safety, you would be disqualified. Okay. And then you have to also merit a favorable exercise of discretion. This parole is discretionary, meaning it's up to the officer whether to approve it or not. It's not like, oh, you meet 1, 2, 3, 4, and you automatically get approved. The officer still has to decide whether to exercise favorable discretion in your case. So if there's anything that you can include to show the officer how you have lived your life in the US, that is where you want to put that, to make sure that the officer sees a full picture of who you are and not just what's on paper. All right. So those are the requirements, right? You must be present in the US without admission or parole, meaning you did not come in with a visa, you did not get paroled into the US. You must have continuous presence in the US for at least 10 years as of June 17, 2024. You have to have a legally valid marriage to a US citizen as of June 17, 2024. You must not have any disqualifying criminal history or otherwise be a threat to national security or public safety. And then finally, you must merit a favorable exercise of discretion when the officer reviews your case. So those are the requirements. Now let's talk about the documents that you can use to meet these requirements, because that's really key here. You want to start getting these together. Some of them you may not already have, and some of these you may already have. So you want to make sure that you are putting these documents together and giving yourself the best possible outcome, because once this opens, a lot of people are going to apply, and you want your application to be complete. Okay, you want to have everything in there so that when the officer gets to your application, they can just go ahead and make a decision. They're not sending you a request for evidence and all of that, delaying the process. So you want to get these documentation as soon as you possibly can, and have it ready to go. So the first one is evidence of a legal valid marriage, right? So this is most likely a marriage certificate, okay? Marriage certificate. That's what you need to show that your marriage is legally valid. If either of you have been married before, you want to also include divorce certificate, death certificate, however that marriage ended, you want to include that to show the officer that you were legally free to marry when you married, because your marriage certificate only shows that you went through the process of getting married. But sometimes if there's a prior marriage that was not ended properly, USCIS will not see your current marriage as valid. So you want to give them all the documentation to show that that prior marriage ended legally and that your current marriage is legally valid. And you do that with your current marriage certificate and the divorce certificate or death certificate if your prior spouse passed away. The next thing you want to include is documentation to prove your identity, right? You want to give USCIS documents to show who you are. And as much as people want to think that you can't use expired documents, in this particular situation, USCIS is specifically saying you can use expired documentation to prove your identity. So what type of documents can you use? You can use your driver's license, whether it's a state issued license, or if you have a driver's license from your country of origin, you can use that as well. Your birth certificate, if it has a photo, right? So your birth certificate and a photo ID, right? Those two together will be good. A birth certificate on its own will not be enough. Okay, I want to make that very clear. If you only have a birth certificate, that will not be enough, but a birth certificate with a photo ID, even if that photo ID is expired, will be enough. A valid passport, you can also use a expired passport. A government issued ID that has your name, date of birth, and photo. Okay, so some countries have a national ID, and if you have that, that will meet this requirement because that will have your name, your date of birth, and your picture on it. So they really want to see your name, date of birth, and your picture. Okay, so whatever you're sending in, you want to have that picture there too. That's why a birth certificate on its own will not be enough to meet that requirement. Okay, a birth certificate on its own will not be enough to meet that requirement. So you want to make sure that you are including a photo ID, even if that photo ID is expired. Okay. The next thing you want to do is show evidence of your spouse's US citizenship. So the way to show that your spouse is a US citizen, you can do that with their passport, their birth certificate if they were born in the US, or their certificate of naturalization if they are a naturalized US citizen. Whether they're a naturalized US citizen or were born in the US, you can use their US passport to meet this requirement. The passport must be still valid. You cannot use an expired passport. Okay, when it comes to proving your spouse's US citizenship, It must be a valid passport. It cannot be an expired US passport. If their passport has expired, then their birth certificate, if they were born in the US, or their certificate of naturalization or certificate of citizenship would meet that requirement. Okay, so I see a question. Tamika, I will get to your question right now. Okay. USCIS said we can use a birth certificate of a child that was born here. My son is 17, so would be good for the 10 years. Oh, great question. I'm actually getting to that next. Okay. So that great question. So finally, you want documentation to establish your continued presence in the US for at least 10 years. And that goes to Tamika's question, which is, are we able to use the birth certificate of children that we had in the US? And that answer to that is yes. Okay. The answer to that is yes. So your child being born in the US shows that you were physically present in the US when he was born, right? You still need other documentation to show that you were here with him for that 17 years, or at least 10 years of his 17 years. But his school records, his medical records, that shows that you took him to a medical appointment, or you are the parent that they reach out to when there's something that's needed for school or for medical reasons, that also meets this requirement. Okay, so yes, you can use the birth certificate, but just know that only shows for that year that the child was born. Okay, but you need other records to show that you were in their life, and that record can be your child's school records, can be your child's medical records, right? It doesn't have to be your own school records or medical records. If you do not have that, it can be your child's, that shows that they live with you and you are the parent that they are reaching out to for everything. Other things that you can use to show the physical presence is if you have any utility bills in your name, rent receipts, school records can be your own school records, children's school records, and that is letters, report cards, things like that. Hospital and medical records are another great one because, again, for you to have medical records in the US, you had to have been physically present in the US. If you have been to an emergency room, they will have records of that. If you have been to a dentist, they will have records of that. So you can use all of those things to show your physical presence. You can also get an attestation. So basically, a statement from a religious entity, unions, or other organizations identifying you by name. So if, let's say, for example, you have been a member of the YWCA, right? You have always been a member of the YWCA. They are able to write an attestation saying that you have been a member for this amount of time and have your name. The key thing is your name must be on there, okay? It can't just be, this is to attest that this, attest the bearer of this letter has had presence in the US, right? It can't just be that. It has to say this is to attest that Jane Doe has been attending the YWCA since, 1996, right? So that's more of what they're looking for there. So when it says attestation, it's just a letter ahead signed by the appropriate person, either in the religious entity, in the church, the synagogue, whatever it is, the unions, the other organizations, attesting to that person's residence by name. Okay, they have to include your name. It can't just say the bearer of this letter. That's really important. You can also use official records from your religious organization. So let's say your church, every single year, you are giving money to the church and they send you a letter at the end of the year telling you how much you donated for that year. You can use that to show your physical presence in the US. If there is, a sign up, or there's a religious thing that's going on and you sign up for it, and it shows in the church records, right, in the religious organization's records, that you were that you attended or you participated in that religious ceremony. You can use that as well. You can use money order receipts for money you sent outside of the US or sent within the US. Okay, so if you're sending money to your family outside of the US, you can use those receipts to show your physical presence in the US. So if you're using like RIA, Money, MoneyGram, I know they typically have an online account that you can set up where you can actually see your receipts. So print those out, okay? And go as far back as you possibly can. If you have, like we talked about with Tamika, if you have children that are born in the US, you use their birth certificates to show that you were physically in the US at that time to have given birth. Your medical records will also show those things, but you want to include as many documentation as you can possibly include. You want, if you have a bank account that you used for 10 years, you can print the statements, and it needs to be dated, okay? The bank statements have to have dates on them. So that's really important. And they're looking for the transactions, not just that you opened an account, but they're more looking at the transactions. So if you're using your debit card to buy things, you're writing checks out of the account, they're looking at those transactions. So that's why I say the statements, not just a verification that you had an account. You want those bank statements. If you have bought a car, if you have a title, license, registration, you can use that as well. If you have a lease, a deed, you can use those. And your lease payments, right? If you happen to live in a place where they are giving you a receipt every time that you pay your rent, or they may have an online portal where you can see those receipts, print those out. Your mortgage payments, also, if there's a place where you can log in and see all of those, print those out. Insurance policies that has like a beginning and end date. And if let's say you had a car insurance for 10 years with the same insurance company, they will have, it's typically for a year or 6 months. So you'll just want all the policies for that time frame. And then tax returns, W-2s. You really want to include as many documentation as you possibly can. Okay, that's what you want to do here. Include as many things as you possibly can to show your physical presence in the US. And you can include things from different categories. So let's say you have your bank statements, and you're paying your rent out of that bank statement. You can also include your rent receipts. If you're paying your utilities out of that bank account, you can also include your utility bills, just to tie everything together. So really important that you have that. All right. Follow-up question. What is merit of evidence discretionary? What is that they are really asking for? Okay, so that was part of the requirements that I'm guessing this is what you're referring to, that you otherwise merit a favorable exercise of discretion. This just means that this is basically USCIS's way of telling us that this benefit is discretionary. It's up to the officer. It's not like there's certain laws that says if this person meets X, Y, and Z, you approve them, right? It's not up to the officer whether to approve you or not. But in this situation, they are saying that this particular parole is discretionary, meaning the officer gets to decide after looking at all the evidence whether to approve you or not. And when they say that it is up to the officer, it's typically hard to then turn around and question the officer's exercise of discretion. either by filing an appeal or things like that. So that's why they want to include it there, just so you know ahead of time what that is. So just make sure that you are including all the evidence that you possibly can to show that you meet these requirements. That's what you want to do, because it's going to be up to the officer. So if there's negative things in your immigration history, if there's criminal records, they're going to take those into consideration, okay? So really look at your history, make sure that you are including documentation that clears up any issues that you may have had in your history. And then as far as the documentation of your relationship, that marriage certificate, making sure that if you either of you have been married before, that you are putting the divorce certificates, okay, so that you are in a good place moving forward. Okay, so to make it great, these are all great questions, by the way. What about DACA receipts from 2012? Can I use that to show proof that I have been here? Yes. Absolutely, yes. So typically when you apply for DACA, you're including, especially with your initial application, you are including documentation showing your physical presence in the US anyway. And having the receipt notice, the approval notice, all of those things from your DACA application and the renewals also goes to show your physical presence in the US. So great question. The answer is yes. And you can use the same documentation you used with your initial DACA application showing your physical presence in the US. Hi, Deepak. Thanks for joining me. Bahrain, thank you for joining. Hello. So if anyone is joining right now and you have questions, put them in the comments. If you're watching this on the replay and you have questions, especially about the documents to include, you want to know if this type of document is a good document to include, go ahead and do that. Put them in the comments. Let's help each other, okay? This is why I do these lives. This is why I bring you information so that we can work together, help each other, make sure that everyone is getting the right information when it comes to this. There's so many misinformation out there that I want to make sure that you are getting the right information. And once we have more information on what this application is going to look like, what form to file, because we don't even know that yet. We don't know if they're going to create a brand new form or if they're going to update the form I-131 and have us use that. So we don't even know that yet, okay? But once we know the forms, what, the fees involved and all of that, I will be back here giving you more information, because this is all brand new. All right, this is all brand new, and we're going to work with what we the information that we have and continue to update you as things come out. If you want to schedule a consultation with me to see if you qualify to get more information on this, or to see if you want to work with me to get this done for you, you can do that by going to my website, lilylegal.com. And when you get there, click on contact us and you'll be able to schedule a date and time that works best for you for us to chat. You can also call my office at 508-443-1788. One second, I see a question that comes in. Manny, great question. Being a small online business for many years and having a 2-year college degree can be used or can be taken by USCIS as a positive factor regarding merit of discretion. Yes, that is that is a great question. Yes. So whatever you can include to just show that you are having a positive impact on the US. This is really you really want to include this if you have any negative immigration history or criminal history, okay? You want to include things to show that you are, reformed, if you had a criminal history, things to show your involvement in your community, things like that. So yes, those are helpful to include to just help the officer see a full picture of the person. Okay, those are great. Brain still trying to. All right. So for people that entered with the parole, there's no new programs that they can get um a permanent residency through. Only the ones that already exist. Those are what is available right now. So if the person entered with the parole and they want to apply for asylum, they have that option. If they have other means of getting a permanent residency, for example, through family or marriage, as you mentioned, that would be an option for them as well. But once you enter on that parole, your options are limited. And we just, we have to be honest about that. Your options are limited on how to get permanent residency. The point really of that parole is to give the person a legal entry into the US and 2 years to figure it out, right? To figure out their next step. Um, but yeah, it is difficult to only have two options. All right. All right, so I do not see any new questions. Like I said, if you have questions, if you're watching this on the replay, please put them in the comments. We we need to help each other through this and ask me questions because guess what? Other people have the same question. That's why I always encourage you to ask questions because other people have the same questions and they may not feel comfortable asking here. So ask your questions because someone else will get value out of it. And also, if you don't feel comfortable asking questions here, schedule a strategy session. It is a free 15-minute time with me to ask me questions, to get information. And most of the time, I'm able to get you on a path to what to do next about your status. So definitely do that if you would want more information. Great question. See, this is why I just said people have these questions and they just other people will have the same question. Can I apply for the parole in place if I have a removal order? Yes, but once you get that parole in place and you want to file for a green card through your spouse, you will need to have that removal or removal case reopened. But as far as the parole itself, there's no specific requirement that you not have a removal order. Even people, if you are currently in removal proceedings, you are in immigration court proceedings, you can still apply for this parole. It's not limiting who can apply for it. If you meet all the requirements, you can apply for it. Like I said, it has not been published in the Federal Register yet. So once we have more information on if there's limitations that they just haven't told us yet, I will make sure that I come on here and let you know what those limitations are. But as of right now, there doesn't seem to be a limitation of whether you already have a removal order or if you're currently in removal proceedings, you can still apply for it. The question is just after you get it, adjusting your status may require you to to reopen your court case and get that removal order rescinded. Yeah, so even if it's that, Letty, even if it's a final order, you may still be able to apply for it and get it reopened. So it's just going to really depend on the details of your situation, but getting the actual parole should not be affected by the final order. Um, All right. So when you're doing the trying to figure out income for the parole program, you want to look at the I-864P and then look at your household size. Right? That's where you're really going to have to look at for the income level that you want to be at for those applications. So when you're applying for that, you want to look at the I-864P because that's going to tell you for your household size how much income you need to do an affidavit of support. And that will be a good gauge. 100,000 is not typically required, right? Unless you have like a big household size. So you want to just look at the income requirements on that I-864P. All right. Okay, so all right, so um great great point. So your household size includes anyone that you have filed an affidavit of support for. Anyone that you have sponsored that are still within that program will still count as a part of your household. Oh, great question, Tamika. So if you have like a bank account and there's two people on it, can you use that? You can, but you also want to kind of show that you use the account, right? So if there's a way for your bank to show that the transaction came from your card or your sibling's card, that's where I'm going with that. Is you just want to make it clear that it is you. Can you use it? Yes. But if you have something else other than that, you really want to use that as well. So this can be a supporting thing, and not the only thing. Okay, unless it clearly shows which debit card was used to buy things or who wrote the checks, things like that. And then if it's a joint account with your US citizen spouse, that also works just the same way. All right. So, like I said, this program seems to be moving ahead. Applications are going to start being accepted on August 19, 2024. We still don't have the details on the Federal Register. We just have a date and we have the requirements and we have the type of documents you should start getting together. That's all we have for now. But once it is put on the Federal Register, we'll have all the information we need, and I will be doing another video breaking those down as well. So let's just run through the requirements really quick before we go. So first requirement, must have entered the US without admission or parole. This means you were not paroled into the US through the border, and two, you did not enter the US with a visa or any other documentation, humanitarian parole, things like that did not happen in your case. You had continuous presence in the US for at least 10 years as of June 17, 2024. You have a legally valid marriage to a US citizen as of June 17, 2024. This means you're not divorced and that your marriage is legal, meaning any prior marriages were legally ended. There's no questions as to the legal validity of your marriage. Okay. You do not have any disqualifying criminal history and you're not a threat to national security or public safety. We do not know what constitutes what they mean by disqualifying criminal history yet. So once we have more detail on that, I will bring that to you. And then you have to merit a favorable exercise of discretion, meaning when the officer looks at your file as a whole, that they feel that they can approve your case. This just means it's up to the officer. All right. As far as the evidence that you need to have evidence of your relationship, of your valid marriage. So your marriage certificate. If either of you have been married before, you want to also include a divorce certificate, death certificate, to show that that prior marriage ended. You want to have proof of your identity. These can be expired documents, but they need to have your picture, your name, and your date of birth on them. Okay. Your birth certificate does not meet these requirements, but you can use your birth certificate with a passport, your birth certificate with a license or a national ID or things like that. But you can't just use your birth certificate because they want a valid, they want an ID that has your picture on it. Okay. That ID can be expired, but they want something to show who you are. You want evidence that your spouse is a US citizen, so their US passport, their birth certificate, if they were born in the US, and their certificate of naturalization will take care of that. And then finally, you want documentation to show your continued presence in the US for at least 10 years as of June 17, 2024. Okay. So you're going back to June 2014 to now, if that helps you. Or prior if you have been here longer than that. But the documents need to be at least 10 years of showing your physical presence in the US. And you can use medical records, school records, and medical records and school records can be your own medical records or your child's medical records if it shows you as the parent that brought them, or you as the parent that they live with. Those can also be used as well. Rent receipts, rent so basically, if you're paying rent and you're getting receipts, you can use those. Mortgage payment receipts, you can use those. Basically, anything that you can use to show that you are physically here. Okay. When you're including bank statements, make sure it has transactions and doesn't just say, oh, you've had this account open from 2010 to 2024, right? That's not going to be enough. You want to show the transactions. So the statements itself is what you actually need. All right. So I see some questions came in. All right, so do you think it's a good idea to include a cover letter next to your application? Also would like to ask you about physical presence evidence. So as far as the cover letter, typically in my office, we do include a cover letter, especially with this type of program where it's new. We like to spell it out to the officer how our client meets these requirements and point them to the evidence that we included that shows that they meet those requirements. Okay. All right. Next question. I use paperless option for bank statements, so I only have a PDF. I have all months and years since 2014, but I'm missing 1 month from 2016. Can I use those? Yes. Yes, you can. Okay. You may be able to find something else to cover that month, but typically, I will say this, typically, if let's say you have June 2016, and then you don't have anything for July, and then you have August, the officers most likely not going to hold that against you because it's just 1 month missing. But if you have other documents that can show you were there for that month, you can use those in its place. Okay. Perfect question. Are income tax filings required to apply for parole in place? No, they are not required. They can be used as evidence of your physical presence in the US, but they are not required for you to file for this parole. They can also be used for the exercise of favorable discretion to show that you have been paying taxes to the US government. However, Is it a requirement for you to be eligible for the parole? No, it is not. All right. All right. So if you have any other questions, please keep them coming. Like I said, people are going to have questions. Put them in the comments. I'm here to answer your questions. And if you think of a question later on, you can always come back to this video and ask your question. Or you can schedule a strategy session. Let's look at all your information and see if you qualify and what additional documents you can include. We can definitely talk about that in a strategy session that you can book on my website. And the information is in the description to this video as well. So I don't see any other questions. So thank you all so much for joining me and asking such important questions, okay? Because sometimes I come on here and I give you information and I want to make sure that you understand. And when you ask me questions, it just tells me that you are understanding and you're thinking about ways that it applies to you. So that is great. Thank you so much for joining me. I will be back soon with more immigration information for you all. If you have questions, put them in the comments. If you want a personal consultation where I actually particular situation, you can schedule a strategy session with me. The strategy sessions are like a 15-minute free time for us to talk and figure out if there's more that I can do for you. All right. So I don't see any questions. So thank you all